So today we're going to look at screen scraping, and what basically screen scraping is accessing a web page programmatically from the internet and then processing that page with code. And why would you need that? Well, maybe there's some data that's on a web page and you need it for your program, but you know, you don't want to go to that owner of that page and ask for direct access to their data, and they probably wouldn't give it to you because it's usually a bad idea to just give everybody in the world direct access to your database. So you might choose to do this through web or screen scraping. So last time we worked with databases, and ideally it's that's how you normally would want to work with data, is just get a connection to a database and use it. But you can't always do that. And so in that case, then screen scraping is relatively easy to implement, actually. It doesn't require the person hosting the data to do any development on your part. And so you can just, read the web page. The disadvantage is if the owner changes the way the web page is structured, you have to change your code. And also, it could almost be considered a bit of a hostile takeover of someone's data if it results in increased server utilization. So, if your website was scraping someone else's website and then using that data, and you suddenly, when yours went live, it started, causing 5 gajillion hits on their server, they may not appreciate it. So you need to be somewhat sensitive to that. Most likely anything we did won't even be noticed because we're at a low volume. But at higher volumes, it could be an issue. So we're going to use the URL library, which provides you functions to work with web pages. And we're going to bring in the request function from the URL library. And from URL request, there's a function called URL open, where we pass in basically the address of what we want to open. And from then on, it actually, most of it because you actually already know how to read a file. And so once you open up a website, you can read it just like a file with read line, read lines, etc., and you can get the information out. So what do you get with a web page? Well, what you're going to get from that web page is something called HTML. How many people have done some HTML? Yeah, so, the more HTML you know, the easier this is. We're going to learn, we're going to learn a little bit about HTML in order to do this. Not a whole lot. But if you learn more about HTML, then it's easier to dig through what you get. Because basically what HTML is a text file with these tags, which are used to format the output that you see in your browser. And so what servers send to your browser is HTML, and what your browser does then is renders that HTML into what you see as a web page. And what W3 Schools has pretty good tutorials on HTML. You can go through that to learn more about it. And, this is a basic HTML document. Doc type HTML. And you notice that there's opening and closing tags. So here's the opening HTML tag, and then there's the closing tag. And the closing tag has a / and the same tag name, and everything's inside these angle braces. And then here you have the head block, which has the title that shows up on the tab of your web page, and then in the body of the web page, what you actually see in the main part of the web page is in the body tag. And between those two, you see, you might see my first heading, my first paragraph. You'll have all kinds of other tags which either present things as headings or as paragraphs, and there's a lot of different tags that format things. So we're going to play around with this, and this one isn't an assignment you need to turn in. This is just some people may have a, if you're looking for your final project, And if you read through the final project, basically it's just got to be a project that you come up with that you're interested in. So you could do a web scraping project if you wanted to. And this is just to kind of give some ideas. And that everything from here on out in this course is just going to kind of be me showing you some cool stuff that you might consider doing for a project. And it's just extra stuff. There's a lot of things in your book that you could look at that we haven't gone through that could be also ideas for final projects. And this is one of them. And so we're just going to kind of play around with this and see what we could do with it. So I think we're going to try to web scrape the or screen scrape the CNM webpage, probably the ones where it has all the programs. And so let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to open up, for those of you who want to follow along, I'm going to open up a up idle. I'm going to make a folder to put all this stuff in just to kind of keep it all in one spot. And I'm going to call this ScreenScrapeDemo.py. And we're going to start off by importing URL lib.requests. And I'm going to go to cnm.edu. And there's programs A to Z. That probably might be a good place to start. And if I look at programs A to Z, I can see I have all these listed. Let's say I just want to get all these courses out of here. So I'm going to copy this URL and put URL is equal to that. And I'm going to use URL lib.requests.URL open. And I'm going to pass in the URL. So this string is going to go into URL open. I will then say text is equal to the web page dot, and then this is where it's just like a file. I'm going to just do read, and then print text. And what it'll say is squeezed text 1368 lines, because it turns out that web page actually has 1638 lines. So I'm going to expand that, and we can see that we end up getting the entire web page, and it's not very readable here. Does that work for everyone? Yeah. So congratulations, you've written a program that has actually opened up a web page and is getting all its information. Let's see what this kind of looks like. So if I right-click on a web page and I view page source. So right-click with your mouse and view page source. It'll actually show you what the website actually looks like. This is the entire website that we're looking at, and we can see it's kind of big and messy and hard to read. But you know, we can get the text out of here. Maybe what we'll do is we'll look for a thing that says accounting in here. So I'm going to Control F find and put accounting. And I can find that there's a section here around line 1478 where all that list stuff here is beginning. And the way I did that again was I went Control F for find and then typed in accounting. You can also if you right click, somewhere around here there's a find function that you can use, but I just hit Control F and then searched for it. And once I found it, well, one approach maybe is I look for this piece here. And so maybe what I could do is I could find where that's located, and then I could read from there. So, you know, potentially one strategy would be, okay, I've got text here. Maybe I say start location is equal to text.find. Find probably isn't, well, maybe find. Is it find that I want, or is it I wish IntelliSense was faster. What is find? So I'll say text.find, and I'll look for that section here, and then I'm going to print start location and just see if I can get a value out of this. Okay, so it's not find I want, it's something else. No, that should have worked. What did it not like? Okay, that worked. I think it's because it's too large. So, maybe there's another way of doing this. So, trying to get through this big file is kind of tough. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at something called Beautiful Soup. Oh, did I miswrite something? Okay. Yeah, I think what's happening is this thing is really large, so it's giving me some problems. But there's a better way of digging through this stuff anyway. There's this library called Beautiful Soup, which works really well for doing screen scraping. It's kind of a weird site, but we're going to go through this demo first, and then we're going to see if we can use it. So we're going to make a text document, and so I'm going to open up a text editor, or I'll just open up regular Notepad. And we're going to take this well, actually, I think we can do this all in the program. So I'm going to make a new program. And this one I'm going to save in the same directory. If I can find where that was. I'm going to call it Beautiful Soup Demo 1.py. And we're going to need this library. So let's see, where can we get this? So I'm going to go to installing Beautiful Soup, and the way to install it is pip install Beautiful Soup 4. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to open up a command prompt. Pip install Beautiful Soup 4. I got an access error, so I'm going to run my command prompt in administrator mode. So in administrator mode, it installed it just fine. And now I'm going to, so go ahead and do that install and run your command prompt in administrator mode. And the way you do that is if you, when you go and open up a command prompt here, run as administrator. Everyone with me? Okay, so now that I have that installed, then what I can, we'll just do this little demo they have. And I'm going to take this code here don't type it in, it's a long example, so just copy and paste it in. And what they're doing is they're kind of, you know, bringing this in as a little sample file for us to work. And we're going to have to import Beautiful Soup. So up at the top, we're going to say from BS4 import Beautiful Soup. And I'm going to start doing my work after this. So we're going to say soup is equal to Beautiful Soup. I'm going to pass in the document, which is just a string. This is just one big long string. And we're going to pass in another parameter, which is going to say we want this to be parsed as HTML. You have actually different parsers in Beautiful Soup, which you can use. For screen scraping, you use HTML parser. Someone was asking about APIs. For APIs, what you get back, you would end up using like a JSON parser. And so once I have Beautiful Soup, then I'm just going to say, just to test this, we're going to say soup.printify. Remember how not really good looking the other website looked when we printed it? We're just going to do that and see what we get. And what we get is, this is kind of messy up here. What Prettify does is actually take the website and kind of, it tabs it out, it nests everything nicely, it makes it easier to see what's going on. And so this is our HTML file here. Yeah, it's kind of like view source, but it's not going to give you, any comments or anything like that. It just takes, you can use it if you wanted to like examine your HTML page. If there's a mess on the website, it'll make it not be a mess. I don't know. Programmers are weird. They come up with weird names. And I think, it's in reference to Alice in Wonderland story, some reference in there. So, they named the programming language we're using Python because the person like Monty Python. Programmers don't always do things for like really good reasons. So it's just called Beautiful Soup, but it's a nice little library for doing this sort of stuff. So, what can we do with this beautiful soup thing that we've got now? So we've got this text file, or we've got this string, which is an example of what an actual website would be. And we put it in this variable HTML doc, and we've made a soup out of our HTML doc. And if you look at these examples, we actually have, we can see like, we had this tag called title. Well, what we could do is instead of printing soup.printify, let's say print soup.title. I'm going to kind of put this way. So we want this part. Maybe we want this title. And I'm going to run that and see what happens. This is kind of unwieldy. I'm going to close this window because I have all that other stuff in it. Okay, now I should be able to run it. And let's see, let me organize this a little bit better. Okay, so what I did is, well, maybe I'll put it over here. So we can see I said soup.title. And if we look at the title tag, it's right here. And we see that what it did is it pulled out of our web page just the title. Does that make sense what happened? So what this allows us to do is basically, you know, if I wanted the P tag, I would just put P here. And if I run that one, I get the first paragraph tag here. If I wanted an anchor tag, I'd put an A for the anchor tag here. And now I get the first anchor tag. So what this does allows me to kind of go through and grab things, but right now all we can do is grab the first element. So we need to know this a little bit more. But did that work? Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm recording, Adam, so you can play around with this afterwards. And then the other thing as I recommend is actually go through this tutorial here, which is all. If you go to keep that link for Beautiful Soup, do like what we're doing here is just copy this code in and then just run through the demo things here. So you can see here we did soup.title, but notice there's also soup.title.name, soup.title.string, soup.title.parent-name. So let's see what those are. So I'm going to say go back to soup.title.name. And you can see that when I put name, it gave me the actual name in the tag, which is kind of weird because we just typed it in here. I can also put soup.title.string, which is actually going to be more interesting. So what did string do? Yeah, it just took in just the part between the title tags. So if I say soup.title, I get everything including the tag. If I say soup.title.string, I get just what's between the tags. Does that make sense? Yeah, kind of. Now, the other thing I can do is if I say soup dot, let's see, soup.a. If I say soup.a, it brings me back the anchor tag. But it only gives me the first one. I can also have soup.find_all and pass in the tag I want. And what does it give me here? What is that thing that I'm seeing? This messy thing I'm seeing here. All the anchor tags. Can someone tell me what an anchor tag is that's done HTML? Yeah, it's basically how a link is done in HTML. So you notice that an anchor tag has an href, which is the web page that this link goes to. This is what you would see, LC, and then there's other things in here that configure that tag. But basically, that's a link. And so what I could do is I could do something like this, say anchor tags is equal to soup, not find all the anchor tags. And since that's a list, if I just wanted the second one, how would I get the second one? Square brace 1, just like, you know, any kind of list, we can use the index, and now we get the second anchor tag. If I wanted the third one, I put 2, and I get the third anchor tag. Link 3. Does that make sense? There's also another function with this. So if I take a link and I say get href, what did it do with this get href? Yeah, it just grabbed this part. You notice this attribute in this anchor tag, href, it just grabbed this piece right here. If I made that be class, the class is sister. And by the way, since you can have multiple classes assigned to one anchor tag, that's why it gives you that back as a list. If I put ID, I get length 3. And then if I go back and said, rather than a get, I said dot string, I would get this part right here between the anchor tags. So you could see that with the get, I can get the attribute I want. With the string, I can get what's between the anchor tags, and then of course there's titles. So you have to kind of dig through and play around with all the examples in that page. But with that, basically, the purpose of Beautiful Soup is once I have my text, I can go and grab what I want from it. And so back here on the href. So does Beautiful Soup kind of make sense? So I'm going to switch back to our demo here. And I'm going to change this to HTML doc to make it more obvious what's going on. Oh, I'm sorry, not that one. And delete this part here. So with URL lib, I can open up a page and get the actual text from the document. That's kind of like this part right up here. This whole piece here. And then what I could do is I could also from BS4 import. I could bring in Beautiful Soup, and following this example here, I could say soup is equal to so now I'm reading from the CNN website. This is actually going out to the actual website. I'm pulling in all the text from that web page. I'm putting it in an HTML doc, and then I'm making a soup out of the HTML doc. And I'm going to say anchor tags is equal to soup.find all anchor tags. And then I'll just print, and we'll do it with a for loop just so it looks a little neater. I'll say for tag in anchor tags, print, for now I'll just print tag. And what have I gotten? All the anchor tags from the website, and all the links. What if I did dot get href? Grab the links. Could I then make this into a recursive call, pass the link I got back to the same, make this into a function, pass that back in, and then actually navigate through and get all the links from all of CNM? Anybody involved in security? Yeah, so which one of the tasks to be done? Have you taken the White Hat Hacker course? Yeah, so one of the tasks, and you have an app to do it yet, but to do it other than this, but one of the tasks is to find all the pages that are on a target site and find all the links to them to see where all the web pages are. Another things that you could, an attacker could use this kind of stuff for is, let's say they wanted to get email addresses to make phishing attacks. Could they use this to go look for mail to anchor tags and see if they could find email addresses? Yeah, and so this is kind of the nefarious part of this, but it also helps to understand where the vulnerabilities are. When you make a website, you really don't want to put email addresses where they can be read programmatically. It's actually better, I think, to make a contact form and have the servers do the emailing to anybody, and then keep the email addresses off of it, because otherwise you just become. That's actually how spam sites can kind of grab email addresses in order to add to their spam. Not so much like another file storage, more like basically you have a web form. The person puts in the return email address, the message they want to send, and the subject, and then what happens is that goes to your server. Your server then formulates that and then sends that to the recipient, and the person who's sending that message has no idea what the URL is. What the email address is for the recipient. And if you set up your website that way, you can help reduce the chance of. It makes it harder to find email addresses for them to do phishing attacks or spam attacks, especially administrator accounts. It's really not. It's a good idea not to put the email address of an administrator there, because administrators have elevated privileges, and so you don't want someone sending a spear phishing attack to an administrator, and that kind of is one way of minimizing it. But this shows how relatively easy it is to write a piece of code to do that. Now, Instead of that, I'm going to uh, uh, put in string and see what that does. And here, now I'm just getting the actual stuff that shows up on the page. And so, if I wanted a list of all the programs, I probably could use that to kind of, get started. Now, there's other things in here where you can specify what if the site is set up, a particular way. So, for example, I don't know if I can do this relatively quickly. I might try to do it just to have fun with it. But, here's that page. If I were to inspect this item here, most websites today, or most browsers today, have tools. And if I right click and rather than view source, I do inspect, it opens it up in a little bit more friendly way for me to see what's going on. And what I'm looking for is maybe a class name or an ID, actually. And so content core ID, I might be able to use that. So if I have the content core and let's see if they give me a useful way of finding that. There's probably, and I'd have to see, find siblings, find previous, find all. So there's some ways I could, oh, I know what I could do. Let me get the divs first. So I could go through here. I'm going to comment these out, and I'm going to work my way through this a little differently. I'm going to find the divs first, because what I want to do is I want to find just the anchor tags in this div. And so, see, and here it says parent. There's this div called content core. So I should be able to do this. Say divs is equal to soup.find underscore all div. And then I will say print divs. And that got really large. And then what I'll do is I'll say for div in divs, if div dot get, I think it should be ID, equals content dash core. Then I'll print that div. And content core And so that gives me these anchor tags. So I'm able to just pull out those. And now within this, I can do the anchor tags. I still get a bunch of nuns. Oh, I need a div. And now I just have the elements that are within this part here, without all the excess ones. So it should have gone all the way down to welding, I guess. Yeah, I went down the welding. I got a couple extra tags in there, so I might have to like clean it up a little bit. But you can see that by navigating through all this, I can kind of precisely grab just what I want. Does that make sense? Yeah, pretty cool. So this is basically how you write a program that navigates the web. And you know, if you think about some application of this, let's say that you're writing some code for somebody to try to help them with the job they do. And let's say a big part of their job is reading through some pretty extensive pages and pulling some information out. The person clicking on links and pulling things out is not actually using what the human is really good at. What the human's really good at is looking at things and making judgments. So could you imagine maybe making a GUI program that goes through, finds links for certain things, gives the information to the person, and then gives them a checkbox to include or exclude that piece of data, and then later on goes through and does some kind of numerical assessment on that information. Does that make sense? Yeah. So where you become powerful with something like Python is I can do this type of stuff in almost any language possible, but Python is particularly, I mean, look at the size of this program. It's not very big. It's pretty concise. The hard part's done really in these libraries, which I just import. I play around with the libraries. I figure out how they work. And then, I kind of have, if you ask me, hey, imagine some boss says, hey, I need a list of all the programs that these 5 community colleges are currently teaching. And I want that in a report every week. Well, every week, some poor person would probably have to go in and copy and paste all this stuff from the website. It doesn't copy and paste very well. They put it in a Word document. They have to beat it into position, and then they would have to, give that to their boss each week, and then the boss would look at it for 5 seconds and then set it aside. So rather than, and it might be important because they probably want to look at that information to see if there's any new programs out there. Well, with this, you could potentially have it automatically pull it from all those community college websites, store the information in a database, compare from the previous database pool, see if there's any changes, and it would just list the new programs that came in. Make sense? Yeah, so now if we talk about investing, that might be something that someone, who's doing investment might be interested in is they might do keyword search. They might go have several different websites which they monitor, and they want to see words like blight or things like grain production down or something like that. So they would come up with a bunch of search terms, and they would look at those news sites, and they would pull all the stories off the news sites, and then they would have their program dig through there, see if they see any negative terms, and then maybe they would use that to kind of help us. And those would those would highlight those stories and kick those stories up to an investor so that they could go look at that and then make decisions. So there's a lot of things you could do with this. You know, I'm not going to go through and teach every little aspect of how this works, but the way you, what you do is, you know, figure out a question, see if you can find some websites that have information related to it, and then go through this. You know, really, there's just two aspects of this. One is using importing the URL lib request to bring down the file page, and then two is using Beautiful Soup to parse it. Once you have those two skills, you know, you figure out what you can do. So if you want, someone wanted to use this as a final project, basically what I would look for you to do is find a web page, bring that down. I would count that as really kind of doing the file or database part, and then do some kind of analysis on it and display, you know, result. Make sense? So that's one final project possibility. And that's all I have for this segment. The rest is lab time. If you need any help or have any questions that I haven't answered through email or anything else, you can ask them. And so it's an opportunity. And if you're trying to come up with an idea to work with, you know, for a final project, let me know. It doesn't have to be anything super complex, about the same level as, you know, like the projects we're working on. But basically what I'm looking for with the final project is something that is your, you know, some kind of thing that you come up with, which is your own devising. So making your own program. Let me pull up the spec here. Yeah, a game like tic-tac-toe would be just fine. Now, there's a lot of tic-tac-toe games out there. What I'm going to ask you to do is, you know, not just do a tutorial, but actually, you know, kind of make your own. If you do a tutorial, try to expand it in some way. So if you found a tic-tac-toe tutorial and you did that, then what I would ask is that if you do the tutorial, you add something like store the high scores and retrieve the high scores, or you know, something of that nature that expands what it does. But tic-tac-toe, you could just do a GUI program, and you know, you could have like 9 buttons on there, and when the person clicks on the button, it would make it an O. If the computer chooses a location, then it would make it an X, and then you know, and every time you click a button, you know, maybe it runs, you know, it runs a piece of code, a function that checks to see if anyone's won yet or not. Does that make sense? Now let me see if final project, this would be here. Let me see if everyone sees it first. So it's the last one here, and the key to this is, you know, pretty much anything you do at some point is going to have loops and conditionals. I mean, it's almost not really possible to write code with that, but I do want you to do something that has some loops and conditionals. Where it's appropriate, use exception handling. And then I want you to save and retrieve data to a file or database. If you're doing it with a screen scraping, for example, really the file is kind of the web page that you're bringing down. If you're doing a game, the easy way to do that is just save the scores to a file. And then you can either be a GUI or console application, and complexity should be, you know, comparable to, you know, the last few programs that we're doing. And if possible, it should be related to your degree or major, or if not that, at least something that you're interested in or fascinated or work with, so that hopefully the idea is you might keep working on this, and it might be some project you occasionally throw some time at. The idea of that is you really learn programming, like you take my course, you learn the syntax, you do a few programs, but you really learn programming when you're trying to build your own thing, and you've got to try to figure things out and do your own research and learn and figure out how to figure things out. If you have a Raspberry Pi, since I can't see the Raspberry Pi, we're not going to bring it in class. What I'd ask is just make a video, or if you can make some video, put it on YouTube, and then send me the link. That's probably the easiest way. If you don't want that to be out in public, you can actually make those private in YouTube, or some way get me or do a picture of what's going on if that's obvious enough, and then send me the code. And then if you're in the ArcGIS program and you want to do an ArcGIS thing, let me know. I can help you work on that. QGIS is free, so you can usually install that at home. That might be a little easier. And then I give you some links, like pygame.org has a framework for building games. And then there's some information here on using ArcGIS. So, rest is lab time. Thank you very much.